in this 19 years, I started my journey as a developer. At that time, I thought the best way to build a product is to create as many bugs as possible. That will give us repeat business, right? Only at a later point in time, about somewhere around early 2011, when I was introduced to Agile and Scrum, I learned that probably that's not going to help. We need to take a different approach. And that changed my entire way of working. And that really helped me believe in how Agile works, how it can be helpful. Slowly, I learned the ropes of being a Scrum Master. And when I started my journey as a Scrum Master, I thought, what an easy job, isn't it? All we need to do is schedule some meetings and we are done. Nothing else is required, right? Only at a later point in time when I exactly went through a particular training on certified Scrum Master, that's where I realized there is so much more to do as a Scrum Master. And since then, I started learning more. It's been about 6 years now that I'm a professional Scrum trainer, an Agile coach, and I'm trying to bring in my experiences to the community, other Scrum Masters, other teams, and helping them to get better with Agile and Scrum. And that's what I'm currently doing. That's my profession, right? That's on the professional side, right? Today, we are going to explore one of the key skills of the Scrum Master, and that is facilitation, right? Now, the question becomes that we need to start with, why facilitation? Why is really helpful? Let me ask you all this. Think of a shape. Have you thought of a shape? If you thought of a shape, please put it in the chat box. What shape you thought of? Okay, circle, a triangle, okay, another circle, a square, a sphere, wow, a star, a sun, another circle, cool, right? So as we are seeing, the responses are coming, and although we got a lot of circles, but we also have some difference of opinion, right? And this is from the people who have just put their inputs in the chat box. Now, when we work within teams, we are also working with a group of people. And do you think, just like we had right now, people, when they start discussing about topics, there will be a difference of opinion, right? And when there is difference of opinion, what happens? How do you make people to come together and get involved and come to a consensus? Will it be an easy job? Probably not. And that's where facilitation comes into picture. Okay. Why facilitation? Well, facilitation because the simple answer is we are going to work with people. And when we work with the group of people who have different personalities and have different perspectives and opinions and needs, then definitely what is going to happen? There will be conversations which will probably end without an actionable outcome. What happens? How many times have you got angry? Hey, it was such a waste of my time. I went into this meeting for 1 hour, spent 1 hour, and probably no one wanted to hear me, right? Directionless, clueless, right? Often we find that these meetings have no value to us. Okay. Has anyone been recently to a virtual meeting where probably you started the meeting by saying, "Hi, my name is Piyush," and then you went on mute and you stayed on mute for another 60 minutes or so, and then again came back saying that, "Hey, thank you. That was a good time for me." Happens, right? Now, is that meeting really adding any value to us? Probably not. So what happens is people often get engaged. And when people do not get engaged, they feel, oh, this is such a waste of time. This is not what I was looking forward to. And that is where facilitation becomes helpful. What is facilitation? If I have to put it in the simplest terms, facilitation is act of helping other people to deal with a process or reach an agreement. Okay. And this is typically the dictionary's definition, but I would go ahead and say, to me, as a facilitator, what I have learned over my years of experience is all we need to do as a facilitator is to create the right set of boundaries. You have to establish certain boundaries which will help a group of people, your team members, to understand, okay, what are we supposed to do within the time box that we have? what is the goal that we want to achieve, right? And when we do that, that will typically help people to come to a consensus, that will help people to overcome any conflicts that they are having, or probably solve a problem at hand. Okay, and that is what typically facilitation is all about. Make sense? Okay, that's my definition. Okay, although as we will explore, there is also what is known as an International Association of Facilitators. Okay, they also bring in their own ideas of what facilitation is about. Okay, now when we look at our job as Scrum Masters, okay, a Scrum Master has to wear multiple different hats. Why? Because a Scrum Master is accountable for two important aspects for the Scrum team. Number one, we have to establish Scrum as defined in the Scrum Guide, and we have to improve the effectiveness of the Scrum team. Now, when we want to improve the effectiveness of the Scrum team, how are we going to do that? We need to figure out, we are going to deal with people, and not everyone is going to be as easygoing as we could be, or as we are expecting them to be. Result, what happens is we often have to go ahead and try to deal with many different kind of personalities of people. And at that time, a Scrum Master's stances of typically teaching, coaching, facilitation, and mentoring come to aid. All right. Now, teaching, coaching, and mentoring, that's not our topic for discussion today. I will require 2 days to explain how these things work. But sorry, what we are going to focus on today is how does the Scrum Master facilitate, and what does it mean to be a good facilitator, right? So, who is a facilitator? A facilitator is a person who is going to help the group of people to come together, work together, and create shared objectives. That is the idea. As I was saying, there is a certification also that you can get, okay, an international certification if you want to become a certified facilitator. And this comes from a recognized body called International Association of Facilitators. Okay, and the International Association of Facilitators establishes that a facilitator is a person who gets into an impartial role, okay, so that the groups that the facilitator is working with, they become more and more effective. Okay, the job of the facilitator is to guide a process and try to create a consensus between the group of individuals so that they get towards the results that they are expecting. Typically, if you look at the Scrum Master's role as a facilitator, we might be facilitating many different events. Okay, for example, you have to go ahead and facilitate a sprint planning event. Then what we do? We have to set the boundaries. For example, what is the time box for our sprint planning? We are going to spend 8 hours. So you create a boundary. Okay, what should we do, or what should we achieve by the end of the sprint planning? We should be able to come up with a sprint backlog, right? Along with the sprint goal. Those are the two important aspects that we need to have by the end of our sprint planning. So what we did, we created another set of boundary. Okay, what should we focus on while we are trying to establish our sprint goal, or when we are trying to establish our sprint backlog? Well, product owner, can you give us more context about our product goal? Can you give us more context about the product backlog requirements that might help us to achieve our goal? Okay, set the boundary for the product owner to establish the context of why this sprint could be important to us. Okay, so as a Scrum Master, what we are trying to do here is we are trying to make our Scrum team more effective by helping them to identify what meaningful results we need to achieve by the end of sprint planning. However, just setting up these boundaries may not be enough for an event to be meaningful. Okay, what needs to be done is we need to help our team members to utilize this event within these boundaries in such a way that it becomes useful, it becomes meaningful, and generates value for them. And for that, we need to start focusing on some good facilitating techniques, understand the basic principles of facilitation. Okay, and that's what we are going to focus on in the next 30 minutes or 40 minutes that we have left with us. All right, so the facilitators mindset. Whenever I talk about mindset, and I often go back to the old idea of agile as a mindset. Okay, what I believe is, whenever I'm talking about mindset, it is more about understanding the values and principles about whatever we are trying to do, right? When you talk about agile mindset, we don't talk about how you are going to do a work, but we talk about the values that were established in the manifesto. Correct. So when you start embracing the values and principles of facilitation, probably you're going to acquire a way of working, which then you can call as the facilitator's mindset. Okay. So let's focus on the first principles which are important to become a good facilitator. Right. Now, what are those? First and foremost, as a facilitator, you need to make your event participatory, which means that all the people who are getting into your event should be able to participate, should feel engaged, right? They should come up with their shared ownership of the work that they're trying to do. Raise your hand if you have been to a retrospective where people typically go ahead and fill in some stickies on 3 columns: what went well, what did not go well, and are there any improvements. And then only 2 or 3 people, they go ahead and put up some stickies. Okay, and then everyone else is just discussing those 2 or 3 stickies. Okay, but not everyone is finding value out of it. Has that happened to anyone? It happened to me a couple of times. And I also happened to have witnessed one team where people went ahead and people identified a list of improvements, which were like, I think, 25 different improvements they identified. And then when I asked, which of this are you going to do? We don't know, right? That was the answer. We will figure it out during the sprint. Well, that would be too late, correct? So people participation is very important. We need to ensure that all the people who are there in this event are understanding what we are trying to achieve. That is important for us. So participation, that's our first principle. Okay. Second principle is purposeful. That is, if we are doing a particular event, there has to be some reason why we are doing this event, why this event is important to us. There has to be a clear objective. Setting up that objective, setting up that focus area upfront will make any event much more engaging, will make that event much more focused. Okay, that's our principle number 2, purposeful. Principle 3 is about process. How are we going to execute this particular event? How are we going to connect with each other? What are our boundaries? Okay, establishing that process will help us to achieve our objectives. If we do things randomly, then we will end up in the situation of my team, which came up with 25 improvements but didn't know who is going to do what and when, right? So establishing the process will enable us to identify the right objectives, create a way or opportunity to achieve those objectives, and also help you to harness the diversity of the people, right? That's our principle number 3. Healthy. Would you like to get into an argument with your team members and then leave the room in a frustrated mode? Probably not, right? That will create barriers to teamwork. Whenever we are getting into any kind of discussion, those discussions need to be healthy, right? We need to understand that we are not here in an organization building a product to satisfy our egos. That's not why we are here. We are here because there is a business problem which needs to be addressed. And as group members, as team members, we are trying to address those problems, right? And while we are having those discussions, we need to be respectful towards each other. That will enable learning for us. We are here, we are discussing, we are arguing, right? We are arguing about what is the best way to deal with a problem. Okay. And that's what we focus on. That's the idea of the principle number 4, being healthy conversations, having healthy conversations, right? Principle number 5 is transparency. Try to create transparency about whatever we are trying to create, what are we are trying to build in our discussions. Okay, that will help us to build clear action and learning for our way of working. The problem that we are trying to solve, we'll get a clear action out of it. Make sense? I'll take a pause. Any doubts here so far on these 5 principles of facilitation? Is there anything in the chat? Let me quickly see. All right. No questions, which means it is good that I can move forward. All right. Now, to apply this facilitation principles, you will need to build some what? Competencies. It's not going to be easy, right? So what we need certain competencies. All right. What are these competencies? Number 1, the competency that we have is creating collaborative client relationships. Okay. When I say client relationships, it's not necessarily meaning that you need to have a customer and a client and you're trying to build a relationship with them. No, what it simply means is when you are working with this group of people, right, whether it is your Scrum team or whether it is someone else that you are facilitating the event, those people are your clients. And what you need to do is you need to create some working agreement, okay, that will help you to create a process that will help the clients, that will help your team members to meet their needs. Okay. Who creates these relationships? Not we alone. It's not our job. Okay. What we need to do is we need to help the team members to go ahead and build their working agreement. How do you want to work in this event, in this particular event, to achieve the maximum results out of it, right? So you start facilitation by facilitating a conversation to come up with the working agreements. Okay, that is the idea. Okay, that's our core competency. The second core competency that we might want to focus on, plan the appropriate group process. What does it mean? Each team will have a different need. Each event will require a different art or different way or different technique for facilitation. We cannot apply the same things everywhere. Okay, so we need to find out what is the appropriate approach or what is the appropriate process for the event at hand, for the people that we are dealing with. Okay, when you're working with a leadership group, right, you might not want to use the same techniques that you are doing or you are going to use with developers. The needs of both the groups might be completely different. Okay, the ideas that they want to generate are going to be completely different, right? So we need to focus on how do we enable that particular mechanism, what process will work in this situation. Third principle, create and sustain participatory environment. That is, we need to create the environment where people feel engaged, where people can get the most out of this event, right? They can participate, which means that everyone who is required has to be engaged, right? We need to respect the diversity and opinions of the people who are part of this discussion forum. If there is a conflict that we see is happening, we need to find out a way to navigate through that conflict. Okay, in a given event, it's not easy to overcome a conflict, okay, because probably that's not the purpose of the event. If you are in a retrospective and suddenly two of your team members start getting into an argument about something that happened in the last sprint, probably overcoming that conflict may not be possible within the time box of your retrospective. What we need to do is somehow we need to navigate through that conflict and help our team members to come to a common understanding. Okay. Also, one more thing that we need to focus on is how do we enable the group to think creatively, right? How do we evoke the group's creativity? That is important when we want to create a participatory environment. Okay. Another competency that we will have to build is how to guide the group towards appropriate and useful outcomes. Why this event is important and what are we trying to achieve by the end of this event? That is very much important. If we cannot identify the right outcomes or if we stray away from the outcomes, then typically the event is going to be useless for our team members. Helping your team members to have a clear process and method that will enable them to figure out, okay, how do we move towards our outcomes is important. Okay, establishing consensus, helping your team members to come towards the consensus. Okay, this is what we all agree to do is also important. Okay, like I mentioned earlier, the team that I was working with before, they had 25 outcomes or improvement actionable items that they identified as part of their retrospective. But there was no consensus on what is the most important one and that we should be doing in the next sprint, which means that although they had some outcomes, those outcomes were not really helping the team to become better, was not helping the team to become more effective, right? So that becomes challenging. Guiding group towards appropriate and useful outcomes is another competency that we will have to build. Next, build and maintain professional knowledge, which means that as a facilitator, you will have to bring various different facilitation methods in order to facilitate the events, right? And probably most of us might have experienced this. You run a retrospective every time with the same technique: what went well, what did not go well, and are there any improvements? Sooner or later, your team members are going to feel disengaged, right? They might feel that, oh, this is not what I was looking forward to, or hey, this is what we do every time, but there are no outcomes, right? So, exploring a various range of facilitation methods that will help your people to get engaged is very much important for us to focus on, right? Last, model positive professional attitude as a process facilitator, which means that we need to be very much self-aware of ourselves, how our emotions are moving through, right? Are we being a good facilitator, or are we getting pulled into the arguments that are happening within the group, and then we are coming up with our own biased opinions and ideas, and we are trying to guide the group towards our own agenda? That will not be the correct way of approaching facilitation. Okay, as a facilitator, we always remain unbiased. Our job is to ensure that the group of people that we are working with, they are going to find their outcomes. Okay, and that is what we need to focus on. These are the 6 core competencies that will enable anyone to become a better facilitator. Number 1, create collaborative client relationships, that is, help establishing the right working agreements. 2, plan the right group process, appropriate group process, which makes sense for the group which is involved. Okay, create a participatory environment where everyone can be engaged. Guide the group towards the useful outcomes, right? Build and maintain your professional knowledge, that is, use the right skills, right techniques. And then yourself, you have to model a positive professional attitude, that is, remain self-aware about how we are dealing with the situation. Super. Now, for these competencies to be in place, for these competencies to work for you, you need to build some skills, right? And these skills are not completely different from what you might have already heard from being a Scrum Master. Some of these skills might be with you already. All you need to do is go ahead and build them a little bit more. Okay. First and foremost is active listening. Okay. As a Scrum Master, this is very important skill, whether you are facilitating or not. Okay. Why? Because oftentimes it is required for us to understand what is going on with our team. When we are not actively listening, when we are not available, when we are just listening to respond, we often miss out on the key characteristics or key aspects that are happening around within our team. We are not able to focus on what is important aspect, what is not said. Okay. Being an active listener helps you to identify what is not said. And that would be the bigger problem that you as a Scrum Master might want to address. Okay. Similarly, as a facilitator, you need to be active listener. You need to be present in the moment and try to see which direction the discussions are going. Are they moving towards the outcome that was established at the start? If not, then you need to go ahead and nudge the people in the right direction. Okay. When I say nudge the people in the right direction, I'm not saying that you go and tell them, hey, this is our outcome, come back to this. No, that's not the idea. Okay. Nudging means that you have to take a pause and ask folks, are we really focused on the outcome that we are trying to achieve? Okay. And you ask them to take a pause and think about it and then restart the conversation. That will help people to understand if they are moving in the right direction or not. Okay. active listening is the key, right? Now, the next one is empathy or empathizing. Why empathy is important? Empathy is important because we are trying to work as a group. And if we do not understand each other's problems or how we are dealing with our situations, then probably we are going to step over each other, which is not good for group dynamics. It is very important for us to understand how the other person is feeling, what they are going through, and how we can help them to become better. And that's very much important in group dynamics. So, empathy is the key. As a facilitator, you need to understand what are the needs of the people that you are serving, what are the outcomes that they are trying to achieve. And when you empathize with that, when you understand where they are, then it becomes easier for you to go ahead and facilitate their conversations, right? Next is problem solving skills, right? Oftentimes it is it is seen that we expect that the scrum master should not do anything. Well, that is okay, because as a scrum master you're trying to make your team effective. But what happens if your team is completely stuck, if they are not moving forward? Still, will you sit back? Probably not. What if you see that there is a big conflict that is happening? Will you still sit back? Probably not. That is not going to help. So, as a scrum master, as a facilitator, you need to have some right problem solving skills. Okay. And these problem solving skills will enable you to facilitate your conversations in the right way. Now, you don't have to always use your problem solving skills all the time. Okay. That will not help you because it might impact your team. They will not become self managing. But then you need to be aware of, okay, if my team is stuck, how do I go ahead and help them? Okay. That is important. Problem solving skills. Another skill that is required is encouraging curiosity among your team members. If I am curious, I would be willing to understand what challenges my teams are facing. Okay. How my team is dealing with a particular problem. If my team members are not curious, what might happen? Typically, if people are not curious, they are like, okay, I am here because I have to get paid at the end of the month. I need my salary. I'm just going to do whatever I'm told. And if we are just doing what we are told, then probably there is no big difference between us as engineers and any other person who is doing what they are told. Correct? What we need to understand is we are in a creative job. We are in a job where we have to use our brain power, right? That's why we are paid higher than most of the other professions. So if we are not curious to understand what problem is at hand, then probably we are just going to be any other doer, right? Not very helpful. Okay. Encouraging curiosity, especially in conversations, when you're facilitating a conversation, is very important because when people become curious, they understand the problem and they become creative in solving those problems, right? Understanding the problem is very much important. Another skill, encouraging openness. All right, I made a proposal. Now I understand it is not good, right? As a team member, you need to ensure that, or as a facilitator, you need to ensure that people understand this concept, that it is not necessary that every idea that they are bringing forward is the good idea. Sometimes they also need to understand that it's okay to let go of their ideas because someone else has a better idea. Having openness to say that, okay, I understand that probably this is not the best approach, right? Embracing your mistakes, embracing change is very important, and encouraging openness will help you that doing that. Okay. Next, resolving conflict. When you are dealing with people, you are always going to end up in conflicts, right? Whether you like it or not. Sometimes those conflicts will show up, sometimes those conflicts will remain inside. As a facilitator, you need to help people to resolve those conflicts, right? Overcome those conflicts or navigate through those conflicts. Okay. For that, as a facilitator, you need to know, or you need to build a skill of how do I solve these conflicts. Again, resolving conflict is a huge subject in itself. Okay. There is a lot of theses and books available on resolving conflict. If you are interested in reading, you can search for a book called Non-Verbal Communication. Okay. It's a very good book, very interesting subject, right? That will help you to help how do we solve conflicts within a group of teams. Okay. resolving conflict. Great way to approach. There's also a model, probably you can do a quick Google search about it. It's called the Thomas Kilmann model, okay, for conflict management. Great model. Okay, again, it's a skill you will have to build. We cannot talk about it in detail right now with our limited time, but yes, there are many options to do that. Okay. um, Next is time boxing. Time boxing is key. Anyone has faced their daily scrums that are going beyond 15 minutes, sometimes to 30 minutes or 40 minutes and 60 minutes also? Anyone? Yes. If you have, then that means that probably our team members are not managing their time effectively. They are not focused on the purpose of the event. Okay. And as a facilitator, you have to keep a check of that. Because if you allow people to spend time, then they are going to use probably all the possible time they have. They might spend the entire day doing the same discussion, and they will keep on going in cycles, in the loops. Not very helpful. Okay. Next is leading, right? When I say leading, it does not mean that you provide directions. Leading means subtle guidance. Okay. If you see your team members are moving away from the outcome that is established at the start of our event or at the start of the meeting, then you lead them towards that particular outcome, but you do not direct them. Okay. There is a difference between directing and leading. Okay. Subtle guidance towards the outcome. That's what we mean by leading. Okay. Communicating adequately, that is, you keep a track of what is happening and you try to bring people back on the purpose, on the focus, right? If you see they are moving away, they are digressing, then stop the conversations, pull them back to what is required. And finally, building consensus. All of this will require different additional techniques so that you can build all of these different skills. Okay. Some of the common techniques that are quite useful, quite easy to use to probably build consensus is dot voting. Anyone has heard about this technique? Raise hand or say yes in the chat box. Okay. I will explain. Very simple. Okay. When you use this technique for dot voting, it helps you to make quick decisions. For example, you have 4 or 5 different ideas and you don't really know which is the best idea to go ahead and apply. Okay. What we do, we say all the team members in our group have a number of votes. Let's say everyone gets 3 votes. Okay. And then we say, okay, go ahead and put these 3 votes. You can distribute these 3 votes across the ideas, or you can give all the 3 votes to one particular idea. Give people 5 minutes to go and do the voting. And after the voting is done, you would see that there is an idea which got the most votes, right? And that becomes your idea to be implemented. Okay. That's dot voting. The typical principles that of facilitation that are applied here are participatory. That is, you're engaging everyone, right? You have established a process, and with that process, you have enabled transparency within the team. Okay. So that's a very simple and easy technique to apply anytime when you have too many ideas to choose from. Okay. As a Scrum Master, there is another technique that might be quite helpful for you, and it comes from liberating structure. Okay. This is called 1, 2, 4 all for idea generation. Okay. My favorite technique, and I have used it multiple times. Okay. What is the idea? You have a problem to solve. You say every person can take a minute to think about this problem and come up with their own solution. Then you pair up 2 people, okay, and say exchange your ideas, find what is common, what is different. Then you bring in 2 pairs together and do the same thing for 4 minutes, exchange your ideas, try to build up on each other's idea. And finally, you bring in the entire team together, and then you go ahead and you say, all right, what all the things we have discussed. This will help you to come up with multiple different ideas to the same problem. Okay. If let's say you have 10 members on your Scrum team, okay, and each one comes with one idea, you will at least have 10 different ideas to the same problem. Okay. And while they are building on each other's idea, while they are discussing their ideas, maybe this 10 ideas might become 20 also, quite possible. Or if there are duplicates, they themselves might reduce this 10 ideas to 5, right? That means your work as a facilitator becomes much less, but you help them to find out what are the best possible ways of getting to a particular problem's solution. Okay. Principles that are applied: participatory, purposeful, process, transparency, healthy. All of these principles are applied in this technique. Okay. The bottom paragraph, you can forget it. I just explained what is mentioned there. Okay. This is another technique. And I definitely will recommend any Scrum Master, anyone who is interested in facilitation, to head to the website of Liberating Structures. You can find it on web, liberatingstructures.com. You will find 32 other microstructures for facilitating your conversations. Okay, it's a great tool available for free. Do explore it, right? Another concept or another idea that will help for big groups to focus is called Diverge and Converge. Okay, what we typically do is we start with a problem and we say, okay, let's diverge and try to find all the possible solutions to this particular problem. All right, and then we just want to, once we have a big amount of different opinions and ideas together, we try to converge them towards a common possible solution. Okay, this comes from the concept of design thinking. Okay, where we try to identify what are the different ways to build a product. Okay, good idea or a good way of applying or identifying great number of solutions for the same problem. Principles applied: again, participatory, process, transparency, purposeful, and healthy. Okay, some of the techniques that you might apply. Okay, now I'm doing a quick time check. Renuka, how much time do we have for question and answers? Have you set some time aside?
Yeah, I think you have plenty of time because we have till 12 p.m. It's currently
Okay.
11:18. So, yeah.
Okay. Super.
Mhm.
So we still have some more time, which means that I can cover one more simple thing and I may show you how you can use whatever principles and skills that we have applied in one of your events. And what is the most important event in Scrum? Anyone? Well, there is no such thing. All events are equally important. But when I look from the perspective of a Scrum Master, I see that retrospective is a place where you can find out how you make your team more and more effective, right? So let's talk about a retrospective. Okay, why retrospective is important? Because retrospective is a place where you inspect the sprint and you adapt to actionable improvements. That's the purpose of retrospective. When I say we are adapting to actionable improvements, what we are trying to do is we are trying to establish how do we become effective in our upcoming sprints. Okay, how do we improve as a unit that can deliver value to our customers? That is the idea, right? Now, how do we do this retrospective that makes sense to everyone? How do we engage everyone while we are doing our retrospective, right? The easiest answer is you have to follow this simple 5 steps to get to a effective retrospective. What are the steps? Number 1, set the stage. Okay, what it means is you need to establish what is the outcome that we are trying to achieve by the end of this event. Okay, when you create that, it helps you to focus on the most important problem. You're not digressing, you're not thinking about too many things at once. Okay, and I will again go back to the same analogy that I have been using today. In a retrospective, oftentimes people focus on the practice: what went well, what did not go well, are there improvements? Okay, and when you go with a practice, you don't have a focus area. And when you don't have a focus area, you will get random things on your board. And when you have random things on your board, probably the outcomes that you're trying to achieve with your retrospective will not come through. So, what is important? Establishing the focus area. Why this retrospective is important for us? What is the one problem that we want to address now in this retrospective? Set the stage. Once you have set the stage, then the next thing to be done is to gather data. All right, that is, ask each and every team member to figure out, okay, what happened, why this problem occurred if we are dealing with a problem. Okay, try to gather data from the people. 1 to 4 all is a good way or a good technique to gather data. All right, once you have the data, then the next step would be to generate insights. Okay, all right, this all things happened, now what can we do? Once you have generated this insights, the next step will be taking a decision, what will help us to move forward, and then conclude by setting up clear accountability. Okay, that who is going to take up the particular outcome and is going to apply it. Okay, or who is going to take up the ownership of an action item to be done? Will it be the Scrum Master? Maybe. Or will it be some another developer on the team? Maybe. Will it be the product owner? Maybe. Depending upon what problem you are trying to deal with. Okay, so follow these 5 simple steps and then you may have a effective retrospective. Okay, what is expected from us as the facilitator of the retrospective? Number 1, help team to set the objectives. Okay, help the team to be curious, right? Manage the time well. All right, use techniques that will help the people of your team to come to the solution of your problem. Okay, again, encourage openness and help them to build consensus. Okay, this is what is expected from the facilitator in the retrospective. Now I'll share a very simple example of how I run a retrospective typically. Okay, Sailboat is one of the common techniques that you might have used or may not have used. If you want to learn more about it, you can go to the website called Tasty Cupcakes. They have a very good description of how to use this technique. Okay, how I use it. Okay, typically set the stage. Okay, so as a Scrum Master, I may, after a sprint where probably we had some defects and issues identified, I might go ahead and set the stage by saying, hey, we made a good sprint, we made a release, but it has led to increase in defects. Okay, which means that quality is impacted. So let us go ahead and focus on the quality for this retrospective. The main area that we need to focus on is quality. Okay, gather data, use your defect trend reports or your sonar analysis that will help you to showcase that yes, there was issue, the quality is impacted, right? You can also, like I was saying earlier, you can use 1 to 4 all to also ask people, hey, why quality was impacted? What were the reasons why we are not able to deliver value with quality? Okay, were we pushed to meet a timeline, or were we not focused on our definition of done? What happened? Okay, so you can use that also while you are gathering data. The next is to generate insights. Okay, so we have this information, how can we help improve quality? Okay, what is stopping the team from delivering quality? Okay, you can use questions like this to encourage curiosity and probably help your team members to generate insights in building a good quality increment going forward. The next is to decide what to do. All right, we may get multiple different ideas. For example, someone may say, looks like our definition of done is not stringent enough. Okay, or someone might say, hey, looks like we probably have not focused on test driven development, or probably the unit tests that we have written are only following the happy path. There is no no unhappy path that needs to be addressed. Okay, so you might get multiple different ideas. Now we need to decide what needs to be done. Okay, like that, like what we discussed earlier, dot voting could be a very good option here, right? Or affinity mapping could be a good idea here. You can use that and you can identify which is the best way to move forward. Ultimately, once you have done that, then you establish the accountability, right? By saying, okay, folks, this is the most important thing that we need to address. Who wants to take up the ownership of this? Who will get it done in the next sprint? Okay. Why it is important is because if you just get 2 ideas and do not set up the accountability, do not set up the timeline by when this idea will be done, then what happens typically is that idea is lost. It never gets implemented. And when your team members see that, hey, we are doing retrospective after retrospective and yet no improvement is coming because no idea gets implemented, then they are definitely going to be disengaged from events. which will not be helpful for your team to be effective, right? So concluding with establishing clear accountability is very important. And one thing that I like to do is to give kudos, saying that great work done by team members. That will be quite helpful. Okay. And that is a very good way of probably running a retrospective. I'll take a pause. Any questions so far? All right. Probably I think this is where I will take a pause. That's what I wanted to convey in this 1 hour that was given to me about facilitation. If you are interested in learning more about facilitation, there is a class from scrum.org, which is about professional Scrum facilitation skills. If you are interested, you can go ahead and take that class also. Okay. But like I said, you don't always need a certification. All you need to be curious enough to learn about the skills, and a lot of skills are available online without any certification. So go ahead, explore that, and become a great facilitator. I'm open to questions at this point in time, if there are any. Professional Scrum Facilitator Skills. I'll put this up in the chat. You can search for this course, PSFS, on scrum.org, and you will find it. Does that help? Super. All right.
Piyush, hi Piyush, Prema here. Thanks for this good presentation. I just have a question for during retrospective, right? So you're saying, I mean, you're recommending that we set the stage with at least one key goal that we wish to solve, right? But what if we have several, or are we saying that, I mean, how do we establish that key goal? Is it during the sprint itself? I mean, during the sprint retro itself, or would it be good to have that collected prior to the retro so that we come prepared? What's the best practice here?
So what I would suggest is when you are starting up your retrospective and you see that there are multiple issues that were identified. Okay. Now the thing is, we cannot solve all the issues at once, correct? Ask your team, what is the most burning issue that we want to address? Okay. It's not necessary that you set it up. Okay. But ask your team to build a consensus then and there itself that, all right, there are 5 different things that we need to focus on, but we cannot focus on all of them. What is the most important thing that we want to deal with in this particular retrospective? And that will become your important objective for that retrospective. And if you have time during your retrospective, you may pick up another item also. Okay. But start with a common agenda.
Thank you so much.
Super. All right. I see in chat there is a question from Nagraj which says, do you mind to share, is there any activities need to be concluded to engage the team? There are many activities that you can run. Okay. But it will depend upon why are you wanting to engage them. Are you willing to engage them to build probably team bonding? Then there will be different activities. Or if you are just willing to go ahead and use your team members or engage your team members to probably solve a problem, then there will be different activities. Okay. Like I said, if you go to the website liberatingstructures.com, you're going to find 33 different techniques, 33 different microstructures, which will be quite useful for you to use them in any of these situations. Does that make sense, Nagraj? Does that help? Super. Thanks, Anshuk, for that. Happy to see you here. It has been a long time. All right. What other questions do we have?
Hi, Piyush.
Hey, Vinsong.
Yeah, just want to maybe share some points also. First is like the collaboration tools. I think nowadays you have meetings, you have ceremonies, and then most of the time probably your meeting will be in remote. And then I think facilitation tools or collaboration tools will help a lot. For example, those are Miro and Mora, and then you can encourage people that is shy to speak. Like a lot of us you see right now is it's not speaking, but instead it's typing. Yeah, so that's the culture. And then you need to encourage participation through all these tools. Yeah. And I have one question is about how do you actually encourage people to participate and create a safe environment for people to speak up? Yeah, I think that is important in a team where some of them are afraid of speaking up, afraid to make mistakes, afraid to speak up their opinions. Yeah, so maybe you can share some of the experience you had. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Great question. Thank you for that. And what I would say is it all depends on how you have built the team. Okay. More often than not, if you are creating a team where there is a clear cut hierarchical structure, then often people will be afraid. Okay. Or they might be not speaking up. Now, what I have experienced as a team member when I was a Scrum Master or when I was a developer is we used to create team working agreements within our team. Okay, how do we interact with each other? And it might sound very funny, but the working agreement that we created in one of my teams, it has the name biryani. If you have heard the term biryani, it's a quite a popular dish in India, made of rice and whatever you want to put into. Okay, so that's what we used to call our what it was our title for our working agreement. Okay, and each of these letters, they stood for a particular statement. For example, when I say biryani, there is a R in it. That R stands for respectful towards each other. Okay. A stands for accepting our mistakes. Right. B stands for build quality in whatever we are doing. Okay. So that way you can go ahead and build your own team working agreement, and that team working agreement will help your team members to be more open and create a better transparency based environment where they can go ahead and speak freely, speak openly. And that is something that has worked for me and my teams. I think it might also help for you. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Didn't like coming out of statement. I think probably that's something you can work during the social contracting phase, where
Absolutely.
you actually work with the team to know how's the way of working. Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. Super. Right. Any other questions, or else I will hand it back to Renuka for the day.
Right, so we have the last 10 minutes for Q&A session. So do you have any more questions? If yes, you may unmute and speak, or you can always use the chat box. All right, so I guess there's no more questions. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, our speaker of the day, Mr. Piyush. We really appreciate. Thank you so much for the insightful sharing session. And so I'll quickly share my screen. All right, so we have no more Q&A. Thank you so much once again. So before you leave, I kindly request to join us in our LinkedIn, Facebook, Meetup, and also our website. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and see you all in the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Piyush. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.